Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Katie.
So here we are, episode 17 of Rebel Therapy Podcast. If you like our content, please consider liking and subscribing. Really helps us out. And today we are going to talk about depression.
Yeah,
It's a big one. So you want to kick it off, Michelle?
sure. Yeah, I think it's something I see often in the clients that I work with, and something I've personally experienced. It seems like a widespread experience. Interesting angle of Gestalt that I can talk about in terms of like one of the core things of Gestalt therapy is existentialism. Like that's one of the philosophies that influence it. With existentialism, it's the idea that you're born and then you create meaning. You're not born for a reason or into some grand plan that you just need to manifest. You're creating the meaning as you go in
Yeah.
terms of what you care about, your relationships, what you put your energy into, and all of
That I remember starting this whole journey, going back and training to be a therapist. I remember one of our professors saying, okay, so the idea behind Gestalt is that there is just no meaning. And I remember thinking, what do you mean there's no meaning? Like, that's awful. It's not anything that I want to hear. But then, take a beat, take a second. The second part of it, to your point, was if there is no inherent meaning, then we get to choose what the meaning is for us. And it took me a
Absolutely.
second to sort of wrap my head around that. But now that I have, that feels much more comfortable to me. It's like, all right, I get to decide what I care about, what has meaning for me, what matters. So anyway, I was just thinking about that as you brought it up.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It ties back to the topic of freedom and responsibility, which we talked
Yeah.
about a long time ago. If nothing has any inherent meaning and you're creating it, then you have the freedom to do that, right? And that can be really liberating. But then
Freedom.
you're responsible for your choices. There's no grand plan that you just need to fall into. Sometimes people find that terrifying.
It also reinforces the idea of autonomy, which I would argue is one of the good things about this type of therapy. The more autonomy I feel I have in my life, the happier I tend to be.
I think
Upside of responsibility.
they're linked, right? And there's some complexity to it. Things that feel exciting and light about it, and then there's other things where it's like, depending on your framing, you can be like, oh God, like it's all on me. Oh no,
Yes,
what do I do
100%.
now? um,
Upside.
Oftentimes people experience at least one existential crisis in their life, whether it's later on in retirement or the classic
Oh,
midlife crisis.
I don't
Sorry,
know, like 19.
on my
I
way
know
back.
most 19-year-olds I know are going through an existential crisis, and I don't think
I
it's
think
just this time that we're living in. I think it's the perfect time where you realize I have control over my own life. When you're a kid or a teenager, you have awareness, but you have no power. When you become an adult, now not only do you have awareness, you also sort of have some power. The intersectionality of that is the most problematic when you are 19 or 20 years old. You've got a lot of awareness, but you've got the least amount of power and control, I would
yeah.
argue, as an adult, right? And
Yeah.
hopefully that increases as you get older. So by the time you're 50 or whatever, maybe you're having an existential moment, but the balance is more there. Anyway, yeah.
No, I think you're totally right. Like I said, I was kind of working my way backwards in terms of
Sorry.
age groups because like, in any phase of life that can happen. You start to take stock of what you have, what you want, and where you want to go. But yes, that age is particularly difficult. And I know it was for me. And I think it's one of those things where, especially when you're finished school and then you're just starting to work, it's like you've been
Yeah.
in this paradigm of structure. Even though university is a little bit looser in structure, you're still in the school year, you're still going for grades. There's this kind of meaning structure that you get plugged into. And then when you get
Imposed
spit
upon you.
out the other end, you're
Yeah.
like, now what do I do? I guess I just go get this job and do that and fall into these
Yeah.
steps of what people think you should want or pursue out of life. But like you said, you don't have a lot of power at that moment. And you're scared. I know I was scared and confused. That was when I struggled the most with depression was in my 20s because I was kind of that shift for me where everything lost meaning. I was like, what's the point of all of this? I think part of it is influenced by I was never really that convinced that I need to just do this and then I get married and then I have kids and then I get a house. You know what I mean? That traditional track. Not that there's inherently something wrong with it if those are the things you want, but to
No.
just kind of blindly follow that track was never something that I could grasp onto. I couldn't grasp onto it and fully believe that that's what I wanted to do, right? So I kind of just
No.
started
So
meandering.
from a Gestalt perspective, I think you're talking about interjects. right? This idea that we grow up and most of us are taught a certain series of things. And as a kid, you just kind of go, okay, cool. Like it's your parents, your caregivers, or whomever it is responsible for you, society, let's say, who says, this is how it works. And then as a kid, you go, sure. And you swallow it down and that's how it works. And then as you get a bit older, you start to differentiate those things and go, hold on, wait, which are my values? Which are other people's values? I think that's what you're talking about, right? And then I would argue that anytime you just swallow wholesale, if you just go along with it without any kind of awareness, that's when it's going to be potentially problematic. Because if I just swallow down a script of what I've been told is appropriate for me, the chances that it's actually going to align with me are pretty slim, right? So you're kind of setting yourself up for failure without awareness around what is yours versus other people's.
Absolutely. Once you start going down that track of what you think you should want, it actually doesn't feel how you expected, or it's not giving you what you actually want. You don't feel fulfilled, but you're like, I guess this is how life is, you know? Obviously, we don't believe that's how life is, but oftentimes people will come to a crisis point where they're like, what I'm doing is no longer working. Part of that element sometimes is that meaning piece of it, where it's like, this doesn't mean what it should mean or what I thought it would mean.
Because I think in those situations, often meaning is perceived as arbitrary, right? Like this is my mother thought was important, or my uncle, or society at large, or my culture, or whatever. And I don't think it's about eschewing those things necessarily, but it is about determining, are these mine or are they not mine? And if they're not mine, do they matter because of my other values? Like I feel an obligation to support my family, or culturally, I feel like this is important to be in line with my family, or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. It's just understanding what's yours and what isn't. And if it's not yours, fine, you can still do it. But then it's a way to do it authentically, and you know what it costs you to do those things, then you can support yourself appropriately. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
about the understanding of what is mine versus what other people's are. And I think that if you are frustrated by that and you don't have the support in place to explore that differentiation, the constant resistance, that internal, this isn't mine, but I don't know what to do about it. I guess I have to do it. I don't want to do it. Whatever those words are for each person. I don't know that I myself have ever experienced depression, but I imagine that's what it might feel like, right? That
Mm,
exhaustion that comes with resisting or pushing. Does that resonate with you at all?
yeah, that does. It's like an internal battle, right? And
Perfect.
there is something depressing about the idea of how I should feel about something and then the idea of how I did feel about something. And the gap
Right.
between the two, and being like, I'm doing something wrong. There's something wrong with me because I can't fit into this mold. And then it's like the energy that you're using to fight yourself, that internal battle, or trying to live your life in a way that doesn't feel great, but you're still fighting to do it. Sometimes you just kind of collapse. To me, that's part of what depression feels like, this kind of collapse. It's not giving up, but it's a little bit like, what's the point? Hopeless, kind of despair. There can be despair, and I've definitely experienced that deeper, darker side of depression, but a more insidious one is that gray bleakness of it. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing horrible, like, everything is just flat. So it's like you're not even experiencing really deep despair, which would be a strong feeling. And then you're not experiencing any joy or whatever. It's just like everything is the same. You always feel the same. It's got this kind of gray mask over everything.
And then the other thing that I think of is I think of the actual word depressed and what that means. Depressed means you're pushing down, right? Something is being pushed down upon, it's being depressed. To me, it feels like weight and heaviness and just kind of a flattening, which is kind of what I hear you saying, if that resonates.
Absolutely. It's like the weight of whatever you've been carrying in whatever
Hmm.
way, you either no longer can support it or you don't see the point of supporting it. Right. And so you just kind of collapse and go on autopilot in a way. There's something so sneaky about depression where it has this way of lying to you and telling you this is how it always will be. There is no other option than this. There's no point in trying anything. And you believe it because you feel that way at the time. You're like,
Yep.
oh, yeah, of course. I can't imagine feeling different than this. And that's where the hopelessness comes in with depression. I think that's oftentimes where you need that external support of someone else, almost like holding hope for you. I'm not saying you don't have it yourself, but I know I had periods of time when I was working with my therapist and I felt completely hopeless, having her communicate her hope for me and being like, I am holding this. I believe this is possible, you know? And
Yeah.
at a certain point, I was like, okay, I don't feel it, but what do I have to lose at this point? I'm going to trust you. I'm going to believe you for a bit and try something different. And that's ultimately what shifted things for me, was that relationship with my therapist.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like I said, I don't know that I've ever felt depression specifically. I don't know if that's true, but I know that for me, when I first saw a therapist in my early 20s, it was all around grief. I can see this now. I didn't know it at the time. But the reason I was so resistant to grief is that I felt like if I stepped into grief, I would possibly be drowned. One of the things I will always remember is the therapist I had said, I don't know what's going to happen to you because I can't see the future. But what I can tell you is that in 20 years of work, I've never seen anyone drowned by their grief. I've never seen anyone stuck there. That was helpful to me because she wasn't giving me the platitude of, oh, it's going to be fine. She didn't know that. I didn't know that. Nobody knew that. But I loved her honesty around that, I've never seen anyone get stuck and not be able to move on. Because as we know as therapists, emotions are like waves. They come and they go. There's always an end to it. But until you've practiced or allowed yourself to experience that, you don't know for sure. So I think that's what she was almost giving me permission to do. And to your point, it was the faith thing again. It's like, I don't really know, but I trust you. So I'm going to have faith that you know what you're talking about. Hopefully it works out. And in my case, it did. But it took some practice. It took a leap of faith, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think
that was the pivot point for me when I could do that. Let myself ease into that or lean into it or whatever, and kind of like throw out my hands metaphorically anyway and go, all right, we'll see what happens. That's when the pivot happened.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Even as you're saying, like, throw up your hands, there is some sense of surrender in that, where it's just like there is this biological process happening where you're feeling grief and it needs to come out and you're suppressing and pushing on it and like fear and everything, right?
Resist.
And
Yeah.
then to just be like, okay, like you're there, just come.
Fuck it.
There is a fuck it
Kind of.
energy to it, you know? And I think
I
that's often can be a pivot point for people when they're in states of extreme duress.
like depression. So what's our takeaway? Fuck it.
I don't know if that's the
Sometimes.
exact. I think it's
Fuck it.
find your own meaning, find your own support where you
Yep.
can take that leap of faith. We both needed somebody to be a tether for us to take that leap, right? That's
make
one
it
important
possible.
part of it. Exactly.
Find the support you need, put it in place, and then fuck it.
Surrender and just be like, let's see what happens. We don't know. I have more to say about depression, but it would be much longer and we can always come back to it. It's a big topic.
Could be a part 2, 3, 4, whatever. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
Like and subscribe if you guys are into it. Thank you.